It's hard to get ranked in Google Maps. It's even harder nowadays. We've got Victor Perez on this episode here today to share some tips and tricks on how to get your GBP ranking. Spoiler, you're probably going to have to do some things with your website or some other listings online as well, not just your GBP. Pay attention to this episode here today. Got some great tips for you. Welcome back to Local SEO Tactics, where we bring you tips and tricks to get found online. I'm your host, Jesse Dolan. Got a great guest here today, Victor Perez. How you doing, Victor? Glad to have you on.
Hey, doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Been coordinating this with you for a while, so I had a snafu last week, needed to reschedule, so I appreciate you being flexible on that and coming on. And yeah, let's talk about some SEO today for people. I think we're going to talk mainly kind of about maps related as the kind of catalyst. But before we get into that with everybody, I want to let them know who you are, why you're on, peel back some of the layers a little bit and get into it. So I'd like to rewind all the way. You were born in Peru, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes, originally came from Lima, so I moved into Florida, South Florida, when I was about 3 years old. Ever since then, I went to college at UCF, Orlando, and now I'm kind of working across South Florida, but I'm over on the Treasure Coast.
Treasure Coast. I've never heard it mentioned like that. Is that?
So, yeah, it's essentially like a whole group of different cities that aren't that big enough to name by city specifically.
Nice. I like it. So speaking of college, obviously you went to school for SEO like the rest of us, right? I'm sure you have a degree in SEO.
I have a degree in finance. I had a brief time, maybe like 3 months, where I actually worked for a financial firm. I actually got a Series 6, so I did get licensed and everything for that type of industry.
And why did you decide to pivot and do this silly gig instead of something more legitimate, if you will, right? Traditionally speaking, like that. That's quite a pivot, man.
Yeah, so I think like originally some of the first parts of it were when I worked at a financial firm, and this is kind of shared with pretty much every other one out there. But there's a lot of rules around marketing, a lot of regulation, obviously, around the industry as a whole. So they would always kind of like prevent people from doing anything other than door knocking or cold calling. So I think from an early standpoint, I already realized that a lot of the work was really just in marketing, which I think a lot of people, a lot of business owners tend to realize. But more so, I wanted to hop firms. I wanted to go to a different one, or one that I thought was specifically better. But they gave me a start date that was about 6 months out. And I think that was when I started to look into things, and I realized that it's because they just kind of hire everybody like as many people as possible, and again, they just have them knock on doors. So it was one of those where while I was waiting for the 6 months, I kind of realized what was going on. I got lucky. I joined one of the Facebook groups. I believe it was Local Client Takeover. And somebody reached out, or somebody made a posting looking for a writer for a website. So I didn't know what it was all about, but that was my start. I just started writing, and then we started building websites, and it kind of went from there.
Never looked back ever since, right?
Right. Yeah. So it was a tiny 2-person agency, 2-man show with a bunch of virtual assistants. It wasn't until later I was kind of discovered and placed into a law firm marketing agency when it was still at its infancy. And that was kind of where I made my start in the SEO industry, I would say, just gaining the experience of what is now over 1,000 law firms that I was able to manage under myself.
Yeah, a little bit of a legend in some circles for the amount of clients managed and the overall scope there. You want to speak to that for everybody, just so they can maybe understand and respect your management and team leadership skills as we get into the discussion, not just being a great SEO nerd like the rest of us, right? Can you speak to that?
Yes. So I guess that's what I realized, and I didn't really ever consider myself a leader. But it kind of just happened over the course of time as we needed to continuously go through challenges, I guess. But so I get to get specific. It wasn't until about 250 clients, monthly paying clients, law firms, where I finally was able to hire people underneath me. So as far as direct management, it went up. That was pretty much the highest amount I was ever responsible for. Back then, it was everything from onboarding to fulfillment to quality assurance to client retention, and even client facing, going on calls and everything. But thankfully, over time, as I built up a team underneath me, having an amazing team. So if anybody's looking out there, there's Brian and Daniel. We've been working for a few years, and after we kind of assembled the team, that's when we reached, I believe, the most amount of clients we managed together was just about 400. So that was over that whole length of time, over through that agency, Social Firestarter, we were able to amass about 1,000 different law firms as far as experience.
That's impressive. And I think one of the reasons I was excited to have you on is, at least on paper and through research and knowing about you, that business side, I think, is pretty unique. There's a lot of people in SEO, and I joked early, like nobody goes to college for SEO. Everybody comes to this through something else and discovering it and then really jumping into it. You were, I'd just say, well down the business path. Member of, gosh, let me pull back up again, Delta Sigma Pi as well. Pretty good, business fraternity, right? Pretty well accomplished academically in those areas. Coming from a family, didn't your parents run a grocery store growing up, right? So you're exposed to just a lot of real world business stuff as well, not just kind of
Yeah.
poking around in marketing. So
Yeah, I would say, I was definitely grateful to have a family where the whole point of us coming here was to run a business. So that kind of ended up going over towards my work ethic now, because everything that I grew to learn was that, you have to put everything into your own family business. So that meant, working long hours, or maybe not long hours specifically all the time, but working until the job is done, which, at least when things are starting out, that usually means you use up all your weekends and a lot of personal sacrifices are made. But, it's throughout the amount of time that I've spent doing just that, that I kind of got to where I was. So I ended up, taking after my parents as far as going into a business fraternity. This one in particular, we did have a really big chapter over at UCF. So that was another spot where I was able to get exposure towards like business leadership. And that was when I really started to understand what leadership was and how to guide or manage a team.
I think another trait that you possess through that upbringing, through that education, and just your general direction, which I always think is, all SEOs that are good are amazing, right? Can do great things for companies. But when somebody understands how this really impacts the business, right, to a business owner, and what it means for that growth, not just chasing rankings in Google or having a pretty website, but really, how does this impact your business bottom line? Why is this an important form of marketing versus, cold calling, knocking on doors, other methods? I just think there's so much more you can do with, when you're speaking to business owners, managers, people making decisions, how you can translate this stuff. And it's not just another marketing campaign. You can really speak to them about how SEO, because our belief, I'm sure yours is too, this is the best ROI in marketing, is if you're doing a good SEO campaign. Why that matters, how to stick out, from the rest of the marketing and media clutter that they have. And when you can understand the business owner's perspective, what's important to them and what this will mean to them, and talk intelligently on that, I think that's important for that client side. But then if you can impart that also onto your team, like, this is why we're doing it, and this is what the end result is for our clients. I think that just changes the
Yeah.
dynamic, right?
Oh, that's huge. I mean, I guess that's one of the more difficult things about building an agency like the ones that we're working with, where like that's the extra level. That's how you go above everybody else. So just to put it to perspective, yeah, it's like, growing up, I could see the amount of like money that it costs or the amount of effort it takes to hire a new employee. But now it's like my team gets to fill out attorney profiles for an attorney that just got hired after we just scaled a law firm because they've been with us for a few years. So it's one of those where you get to actually act upon the change and really see the amount of benefit that you're putting back into the real world, which I guess, for the first time, I've always been a big computer nerd. So it's like for the first time I actually get to see how the real world reacts to everything, all the hard work that we put in. And that's, I guess, that at the end of the day, that's what keeps you making all the sacrifices that you need to, especially as you're still growing a small agency.
Oh, and we've talked before on our show in different conversations. Um, the fact that we get to sell a service that helps businesses grow and achieve their goals and dreams for business owners, um, that just for me, that's a full circle thing that really makes a big impact. And um, yeah, just knowing that you're doing a good job, not selling smoke and mirrors, and snake oil to people. Truly giving them some good marketing and some good insights to grow their business and achieve. And yeah, just to reiterate, I think you're impressive understanding that full circle, how that comes around. And let's dig into some
Thanks,
stuff.
man.
Let's dig into some stuff to help some business owners and marketing managers here make some improvements. So what we want to talk about here today, Victor, is really centered around the maps, right? Google Maps, Google My Business, Google Business Profile, things like that. And talking about, I mean, there's been a lot of changes. Google's constantly changing, and they're not slowing down in those changes either. But really talking about maybe some tactics or some strategies people need to understand for what's working right now for map ranking, how your website and then the maps kind of play together, and things of that nature. So, do you have a piece of knowledge or a tip you want to kick off with, Victor, before I start peppering you with some follow up questions?
Yeah, I would say just to even get into the topic, it's one of those where, you can definitely get lost with all the updates and all the news that go around. But I think at the bottom line is to focus on what Google's end goal is. So what their goal is to begin with, but what their goal is to their adjustments on the platform. Obviously, they want people to stay on the platform, and the changes that they've been making lately are revolving quality, making the experience for the user better and better and better. And simply by doing so, and maybe making it tougher for things to get indexed, for things to actually end up on the search engine, simply by making tweaks there, all of a sudden we start to see places like maybe not even just SEO, but SEO or the gig workers, the white label agencies. All of a sudden, everything starts to change because a lot of the simple little properties, the little crazy articles that we would spin up, no longer end up on Google search and deliver the same amount of push that they used to. So to even begin with, I would say take a good look at what you're about to spend your money on and see if that has been adapted over the last few years to match higher levels of quality.
Now, Victor, you mentioned, just to clarify for anybody listening, about content or some of these materials getting indexed. You want to just elaborate on what that means if somebody didn't quite understand that phrase and why that matters,
Yeah,
what you're
so
talking about?
right. So not everything that exists through the internet is found on Google. It's only a tiny piece. Now, sure, it is a massive amount of data as far as how much they're containing, but they can't actually possibly contain everything. So there has to be rules in place. Not only that, but the rules have to be a little bit strict because us marketers like to spam pages like crazy once we get a little bit of AI and automation in place. So simply speaking, indexation means if something is indexed, it has been recognized by Google and deemed to be of good enough quality to serve to its users in some capacity. So if your page or your entire website, maybe hopefully not your whole website, but if your page, your profile, your citation, your directory listing is not found if you Google search it, that means it's not indexed. And I would go as far as saying that is not contributing to your entire SEO campaign the way that it used to back when they used to allow more things to end up on their index.
Right on. So, can you give maybe a few more specific examples of what are these pages? What are these properties? What are these listings that people either have been creating historically? If you want to comment on what doesn't work anymore, or just in general for people who again may not grasp what you're talking about for what to build and what to put out there. Just elaborate on that a little bit if you could.
Yeah, I can name one specific strategy or product that the majority of SEOs are using for maps. So let's say press releases, digital press release services, or putting out a digital press release. Not to say that it doesn't work anymore, but it has changed tremendously. So I can give an example of people that would sell a press release that was maybe not on AP News, maybe not on Yahoo Finance, like the big ones, but let's say it's on tiny little news sites. Maybe they don't even name them because they'll just say, oh, it's just a Google News approved site. You know, websites like that where the entire goal of that news site was just to spin up articles or to scrape the internet, that stuff doesn't index anymore. So there's a lot of press release services that SEOs still use, which are, it's definitely the cheaper ones, obviously, but they no longer, if you check, like if you get your whole deliverable report of 200, 300 sites that that article was released to, you'll notice that probably there you might have one that is on the Google index, maybe. And there's some services where I'll check and none of them index, or maybe it'll index for like a day or two and then it just pop right out. So all of a sudden there's a big amount of shift that happens because if you're just using the cheap stuff like that, that's not pushing any sort of movements anymore.
Hey everyone, just a quick message about our free SEO audit tool on localseotactics.com, and we'll get right back to the show. If you haven't taken advantage of it yet, go on out to localseotactics.com/free SEO audit, or look for the yellow button up in the top right corner, click that. And it's going to take just a couple seconds. You enter in the page that you want to optimize, what you're looking for the audit to score against. Enter in that page, enter in the keyword you're looking to get optimized for, and enter in your email address, click the button, and it's going to take a few seconds, and then it's going to send you off a PDF report via email. It's a great report. It's going to kind of give you an overall score of some vital SEO areas for that page and for your website at large, even though it's auditing this page. That's going to tell you some of the good things that are happening, some of the bad things that are happening too, and give you basically a checklist of some things that you need to shore up and what you can do to improve your SEO for that page, for that keyword that you're auditing. Now you can use this as many times as you want. You can do multiple keywords, multiple pages, multiple keywords on the same page. You can even use this to check against your competitors, right? If you want to do a little reverse engineering, see how they're scoring for a certain keyword, what they may be doing good that you're not, and some things to improve there. So lots of different ways to use it, completely free. Again, go on to localseotactics.com/free SEO audit, or look for the yellow button in the top right corner of the website. And to your point, so yeah, you create a press release and you push it out and it gets syndicated, if you will, to 300 different listings online. As an owner or whatever your position is, you may be thinking, that's great, right? I just got this piece of information out there to 300 different outlets. But what you're really highlighting is, I mean, sure, maybe you get some actual human eyeballs on it and maybe get some people coming back to your business. Okay, there could be some value there. But specifically from an SEO standpoint and in the eyes of Google, what you're saying is if those 300 listings, those 300 mentions of your press release online aren't picked up by Google and you can't find them in Google search, they're not indexed by Google, then from an SEO standpoint, that really didn't give you a whole lot of value, right? For your time or your money. I just spent some.
Exactly. And yeah, it totally depends on, well, I guess the big shift is, okay, let's maybe not go for press releases that advertise 1,000+ news sites, knowing that those aren't going to do anything. Let's go for the higher quality ones, the higher quality wires, the ones that are for sure going to work. And I mean, there's some that will stay, like the articles will stay indexed for years if you get the really expensive ones. So I guess from a business owner standpoint, it all sounds good, but from the Google search standpoint, why would I fill up my search index with 300 of the same articles when I can deliver a better experience serving users only one iteration, the one iteration being off of the best website off of the wire? So yeah, and that's kind of like the reasoning behind that.
No, which makes it a lot of sense when you think about it, right? From Google standpoint, from quality control standpoint, and these things. So, not a big mystery, but just something to your point. Definitely be aware of. Now, your example you're using there, Victor, is press releases. Um, we've talked about citations you mentioned and other things. This applies really to anything that people may be creating for their business, though, right? Like, so you have your website, which you control. We're not talking about that, right? And we're not talking about your Google business profile. You're talking about basically all the other, I usually refer to them like third party websites, right? Other areas you're mentioning.
Exactly.
Same thing holds true here too, right, Victor? Like, make sure that the websites you're engaging with, where you're putting your information out there, are in Google, will be on Google, and you're not putting it out there where Google's never going to see it.
And even just saying that changes so much from just a few years
Sure.
ago, because similarly, people that advertise, oh, I'll do 300, 400, 500 citations for you, if the majority of those don't index, you're just wasting your money and time. So yeah, if you apply the same knowledge, which ones are actually getting indexed? I guess that's probably the best way to check directly how much value something has, if it's getting crawled and updated on Google search. Everything else, I would say you don't have to be doing those anymore.
Right. Well, that's good, because I know I've talked to plenty of clients that come on board, and you see so many of these things. Whether you go to Fiverr or just different gig outlets or seen it in Facebook groups, it's so easy to push these things out to owners, and a lot of this seems so much like
It's like 3,000
yeah,
citations
a huge
overnight.
silver bullet. Like, oh hell yeah, I need like just massive quantities. This is the secrets all these SEO people do. Let me just pay $10, right, or pay a couple $100 in some cases, and do these things. But I think the moral of the story there is, like you're saying, do some research first. You get some examples. Is this stuff sticking in Google? Is it existing in Google to begin with? So that's what we're looking for these things you're talking
Yeah,
about at the end of the day.
or is the marketer pushing it because they, again, it's so easy to push it. It's so easy to be like, look how smart I am. I have code that can spin out
Right.
thousands of citations.
Right.
It's so easy to push that in front of people.
No, that's good. And I think getting into the weeds a little bit there to help bring some clarity, for everybody is good, because that can be such a confusing part of SEO, is like purchasing or utilizing some of these types of services or things. I know it can be very foggy for everybody. So I really appreciate that. Um, where do you want to go next, Victor, for things that are mattering right now for the maps?
I would say, press releases still have their effect. It's not one of those things where you always call for a press release to fix a rank, but I think a lot of the times where I'm trying to fix a particular category of rank. So a lot of the businesses I work with are law firms, so they might have different case types where maybe they rank really well for one case because they've always been known for it, they've always gotten traffic for it, they've always gotten reviews for it, but they're trying to do something new or they're trying to go to a new location. Um, all of a sudden, one easy way to push new relevance can be with a press release, especially one where you're getting a high quality one. And I mean, if you're publishing something on AP News, Google's going to have to, Google and search engines are going to have to assume that that's correct, especially because places like AP News have a good amount of quality assurance to where they can be trusted like that. So I still see a lot of situations where you can address indexation. So I'll give you a tidbit. GBP sites, I'm still building them. A lot of people, it's some of them you can't see it anymore. You have to know how to find them now. But I'm still building the GBP site so I can put all my citations on there, because now I can do a press release that points to the GBP site and force crawls a lot of those citations, which I spent time on.
Now, let's
So
pause
there's
there.
a lot
Let's
of,
pause there, Victor.
yeah.
GBP sites, just like a ton of stuff, obviously, right? Just that I'm going to slow it down in a few spots here for everybody else. Here we're talking about the free, I'm assuming, just to be clear, the free website that comes with your GBP, which used to be maybe a little bit more prominent, now is kind of hidden. But can you, real quick, give people a nickel tour on what that is and then why you think it's still relevant for the example you were just given?
It's a very interesting property for sure, because people haven't really known what to do with it, and Google hasn't known what to do with it either. I mean, you could tell it still exists, but they don't show it anymore. And on brand new listings, you might not even get the option. I had a Google search, somebody figured it out on my team. There's just a way to view source and end up opening up the page to edit it. But it's a mini site. It's directly attached to your GBP, so you can have one for each GBP. It's a Google property. So thankfully, it's one that Google crawls or will crawl as soon as you update it. So you can use that to your benefit. Again, putting into context, indexation is harder now. Well, what if you do a whole list of niche specific citations, ones that actually get traffic, but they're just not getting crawled or not getting updated? You can throw everything there as well as just a description of the business and what services they do in that location to deeply tie all of the signals together. Now, why do you need to tie things so deeply? A lot of times you don't, and you don't really need the GBP site in many situations. But what if you have a business? I know this happens a lot with contractors. What if your name is a little bit generic? What if it's just city roofing? And what if there's like five other businesses in that city that have a variation of that all of a sudden? And this happens a lot with generic names. The signals, it's so hard to understand what goes to what when people are searching city something and they either go to your site or sometimes somebody else's site, somebody else's. So that's where it can really become a powerful part of your campaign where you can get that specific when it's needed.
And just kind of, lack of a better phrase, kind of glue everything together for your entity, for your business, right? Like just calling it out specifically, by putting those links there and connecting it all together. That, yeah, this is me, that's our stuff.
That this LinkedIn is for us. This is our Angie's List. This is our Yelp. Exactly.
While we were talking, I just pulled up for everybody watching and listening. We did, this is a little bit old. It was episode 74. We did cover the Google My Business website, the free website you may not be using. To what Victor's saying, though, when we covered this back in episode 74, this was a thing you could actually get into and easily manage and utilize. Not very easy to access anymore. But check that episode out if you want a little bit more of a primer on what we're talking about. It's still there. It's just hard to get to and it's hidden. But a lot of these concepts will still apply.
It still works the same too.
Nice. And so just to back up, because I stopped you and said, let's talk about what the heck you're talking with this Google website, right? And how to use it. So what you're saying, though, is once you can get in there and manage it, which maybe we'll do another episode down the road to get a little technical with everybody. Skip that now for time. But use that to put your information, your links on, right? This type of stuff you want to get indexed, you can throw it on your Google website. Google's property. Theoretically, they should see it, they should recognize it, and at least have a chance to get your stuff indexed and recognized. So anything else you wanted to add on top of that topic, Victor, before I interrupted you?
Another thing I would mention briefly, which again can be a whole separate topic, is network blogs. A lot of people use them in many different ways. I think the best terminology to cover all of the different types is a network blog. Same idea where people used to spam lots of pages. Same thing where you can improve the quality, but I'm seeing a lot of really big, really competitive like law firms in the bigger cities start to leverage network blogs. It can be news websites, it can be like legal research websites, but everybody's getting separate domains, ranking them, doing their own separate link and content efforts, and pushing authority back towards their main brand. Just something I thought I'd introduce.
Very interesting. So if people don't know about what would exist for their industry or their area, what, maybe just do some Google searching, see what results pop up? Do you have any advice there, generically speaking, for people?
This one's a little bit tougher to find on your own because they don't always make it obvious that it's a property that they own. So you would have to be doing backlink research, checking what all links your competitors have. And if you're in a really big city in a competitive niche, there's a good chance you'll end up finding an additional website that business has that is not meant for services, it's meant for informational purposes. But yeah, I mean, just kind of grabbing an addition, like, it's like, okay, to be an authority, you have to be mentioned by other entities, preferably more authoritative entities. If you don't have those, you could build them.
I always liken it with a stupid metaphor, but so I moved around a lot growing up, right? So I was always like the new kid at school, or not always, but often. And so I kind of liken this to, if you want to be a cool kid, go into the lunchroom the first day, find the cool kid table and sit down there, and you'll get that association, right? Kind of same thing here. If there's more authoritative websites in your niche or maybe your local area or both, and you want to be associated with, that niche in that local area, man, you got to go sit at the same table as those websites, right? Or find your subdomain or get your folder on this website, like you're talking. And for everybody listening, if this is a tactic or a strategy that maybe is too advanced for you, or you're like, how do I find these things? What the hell is Victor talking about? We here at Intrix or Victor at On the Map are here for this type of stuff. You can go to the episode page here. We'll have Victor's contact information and email there, everything else to outreach. So don't feel too bashful if this is something that sounds complicated and technical. This one is. This one is a little bit technical and maybe tricky to get to, but powerful. What else do you got, Victor?
Yeah, and it's definitely something that it's not even just business owners, but even marketers. Some of them still have to kind of learn how to update their processes. But outside of that, I mean, I feel like I've introduced a whole bunch. Outside of that, I think my other suggestions are more generic, right? Like having reviews, making sure that you've noted that review frequency is what has more weight now, not just the aggregation. So not just your total reviews. That's I see that happen with a lot of business owners when they first start with Maps SEO. They think that, oh, my previous years of work will suffice. And to a degree, yeah, you've built beautiful relevance and authority, but there is now weight on frequency. This does help new businesses get into the game. So it's sort of like a catch-up provision type of thing that's been added to the Maps platform. So definitely be mindful of, you can't just get away with, oh, every 2 months or 3 months I send out emails for reviews. No, at this point, especially if you're somebody like a law firm, you need to hire somebody that's job is to be working on getting real reviews for each of your locations. Like that's how important it is. And I'll tell people right off the bat, if I don't see enough reviews, I'll let them know. It's like, I don't know if you can do this.
No, we talk about reviews all the time, either on this show or with our clients. You're dead on, man. And I really like how you're talking about their frequency, because you can't just get up to 100 or 200, whatever your goal is, and then stop. If you think about it like a real human being or like Google, Victor, if you're just getting reviews every day, every week, whatever, and I'm making these infrequent pushes, like which one looks more natural, which one looks like a better business, how it's being run, and all things being equal, you should win over me in that regard, and that just
Yeah.
makes
And
sense.
at this point, yeah, and like at this point, I know people that even work for like car dealerships where their whole job is to follow up with people just to get reviews. Like that's their whole job. That's how much money it brings in for that business.
Oh yeah, I love talking reviews just because it's those user generated signals, right? It's like real stuff. It's not us search marketers coming up with a clever keyword phrase or a backlink trick, right? This is another human being vouching for the business and giving real signals, real proof that it's legitimate and trusted. And yeah, Google would be silly not to put a lot of weight on those types
Yes.
of
So
factors.
I think the other, yeah, I think the only other advice I'd put on top of that is, yeah, invest into it, incentivize like your internal staff to be getting the
Yeah.
reviews, make a game out of it, make the bonus structure based upon reviews. But investing into it and paying more so for the better reviews, like if somebody puts a video in there and full text, paying somebody way more for that
Right.
than not. And when I say pay, I do mean internal staff, not the end client.
Right. That's definitely get into some Google guideline issues there, right? If you're paying for reviews or incentivizing those reviews. But yeah, we always recommend that same tactic. Get your team on board, because you know what? It's not easy to confront somebody and ask for a review either. Like there needs to be coaching and training there. That's not a space that most of us are usually comfortable in. And it takes some prodding and, like you said, some gamifying, some goals, some rewards to do it. But as an owner or marketing manager, whatever your position is, to influence getting those reviews, man, time and money well spent, because those real world signals are just hard to replicate for the traction and the juice that you get. So
And you can move them with you. I know a guy
right.
that was doing, he has a towing business. He came from Kansas all the way down here to South Florida. He moved his Jeep. He just updated the address. He brought it all the way over. and immediately was just ranking here and just getting business here.
Awesome. Which, makes a ton of sense. He should. So it's still the same guy, still the same business. So that's an excellent tip, and just reinforcement, always stay on those reviews all day, every day for you. Any other tidbits you want to drop, Victor, while we're at it?
The other side to it, I think, I guess the other side to people asking me, so yeah, so a lot of people, other marketers or even just end clients will ask, like, what do we do that's just GBP specific? I think the big thing when you get that question is to kind of come to them and see if maybe they have outdated info. And like I said before, marketers have outdated info sometimes, and the business owners themselves for sure will have outdated info. Because if they're just going to Google and searching stuff up, they're just going to find like all the generic people that rank their stuff up there that aren't exactly up to date. So as far as what you can do, I think you need to address the fact that it's not so divided anymore. Because before you could spin up all these little extra properties or additional citations to influence just the GBP. Nowadays, you have to look into what kind of traffic are you getting on the site, because you kind of work your way backwards. Who's ranking the best in the maps, and now check out their domain. What kind of traffic do they get? Most of the times, the way it works is, let's say, if you are the top ranking with the widest radius for DUI queries, it's because you're ranking for people that search articles for what happens first time DUI, what happens on my second DUI, third, what happens if this happened with the breathalyzer. It's people that have traffic for all of those queries that are dominating. And there's people over here trying to spin up citations endlessly when they just got to look at the website and what they're bringing in traffic for, what they're authoritative for. Now, all of a sudden, what does that mean? It means you might have closed down a client on a contract for just maps rankings, where now you have to take responsibility of the website, the content, and the links that are getting pointed to it, which are way more expensive. And now you need to have a web team. You need to know how to work WordPress. You need to know minimal levels of HTML, CSS. You need to know how to work the web builders, unless you're building it fresh. If you're building it fresh, you need devs, so on and so forth. And it gets really expensive very fast for all the big niches.
And you're leaning there towards something that I love talking about, particularly to clients, is we still need you, right? We're an SEO firm. We're going to do all this magic for you. Don't do that yourself. Like, just let the experts be the experts in this area, because there's a ton to learn and there's a ton to stay on top of. We'll do that. You be an expert in your business. And we're going to need your expertise, because, to your point, Victor, like you're just saying, these different articles on like what happens when this, what to do if that, these are questions. These are answers that your SEOs probably can't answer. And like, no offense to you, like a great creative writer, professional writer too, you still need to have the knowledge base or the expertise, right? And who better than the great 5-star thriving business that does this every day, right? So if they want to participate in the SEO and in the web stuff, all right, give us this information. We'll tell you what kind of articles or what kind of questions or what kind of things are needed outside of just, DUI lawyer near me, right? Because we had to build that knowledge base to make you the most prominent expert in your area for this topic. Even if you just want to show up in the maps, like you're saying, right? That's doesn't really matter anymore, that you can just manipulate a thing. Google's getting more sophisticated. And really, at the end of the day, we all have to remember their job is quality control. They want to make sure the best results are at the top. All these things just logically make sense to who is the best result, right? Who's giving the best answers, who's got the widest scope. All these things matter. So,
Oh, and even social media. Last thing I'll throw in there, social media is getting more weight. So if you haven't already checked, I do look at SERPs a lot for the really competitive areas. There's certain law firms that will pop up a little bit extra higher than they should, because they're getting a lot of traction over different mediums like TikTok, Twitter, YouTube videos, and that has more weight nowadays. So it's like, oh wow, you need somebody to hold on to, or be responsible for that too. Like, yeah, there's a lot involved.
yeah, that's a great tip. That's a great tip right there too. And kind of forget about it at the end of the day, maybe because we use Facebook on our phones, maybe more than we do our web browser, but that still exists on the internet, right? That's still content that's out there and indexable, searchable, or viewable like Google. So that's a great tip too. Yeah, just dominate your authority wherever you can online, right? Any digital property um, where it matters and it's ranked in Google, indexed by Google, right? Pay attention to these things. Kind of back to what you're saying earlier. If Google doesn't know the thing exists, you shouldn't put your time and energy into that. On the flip side, that
Exactly.
Facebook, Instagram, any new social platform that you're not engaged with as a business, if it's popular and Google's aware of it and millions of other people are, being active on that's going to matter for your SEO too, right? Maybe not the number one thing. Again, I don't think anything here, Victor, was like this one silver bullet people need to pull out and just do this one thing, right? That's not how this works
It's
anymore,
the holistic
right?
it's the holistic approach that works the best. And also, just for anybody wondering, it's the more specific you are on one thing. So if you like slam your website with links and make your way to the top, sure, you can make your way to the top, sure, but it's
Right.
volatile as compared to a holistic approach.
Right. So, Victor, I think that's plenty for people to chew on. We're going to put a bunch of information here in the show notes for everybody to reach out to and everything else. But I'd love for you to just take a minute, tell people what you got going on. If you're comfortable sharing email or maybe websites, how can they reach out to you? How can they contact you, learn more information, touch base with you, things like that? What do you want to share?
Sure. So it's first name Victor at on the map is my work email. Otherwise, we're pretty active on LinkedIn. We have what we would call a superstar or all-star SEO team. So you'll see that we are pretty like forward public facing. And we're working on case studies all the time to make sure that people really see all the difference that we put into our campaigns. But yeah, I would say check out On the Map. We're Miami, mostly law firm focused as far as SEO, but we do other verticals as well. But based in Miami and managing some pretty impressive big ranks, at least in South Florida so far. But we're very quickly taking up some very large cities. So be on the lookout for the case studies that we're pushing out there.
Cool. No, good stuff, Victor. Thanks for sharing. Like I said, everybody, check out the show notes. We'll have all those links for you too that Victor just rattled off. And yeah, if that's your niche or your space, look him up. Look him up. You're going to be happy. So, all right, Victor, thanks for jumping on. Appreciate you sharing some wisdom with everybody listening and watching. Hopefully, you picked up on some of that. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Take care.
Thank you so much. It was a great episode. I appreciate the opportunity.
Anytime. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode. That was great talking with Victor. He shared a lot of good nuggets. We had some conversations about some future topics that we're going to have Victor back on for to dive a little bit deeper. You can see he's a wealth of knowledge, very smart, very technical with SEO, and definitely understands how to get ranked on maps and your website and how those all play together. So hopefully you got some good action items, took some good notes, and there's some things that you can do on your GBP website and third-party listings here after this episode. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care.